the dead. Do we have good reasons for thinking that Jesus resurrected from the dead? One of the chief reasons for believing this is the multiple reports of appearances of Jesus to his disciples and friends. But as I've pointed out previously, according to Dr. Raymond Brown, the reports of Jesus appearing on multiple occasions to his disciples are actually reports that evolved from a single report. In other words, there was a single report about a single incident of Jesus appearing to his 12 disciples, rather 11, and then that one report emerged into a variety of reports. Dr. Craig issues a corrective, and I like to look at that because I did a little bit of homework too after Dr. Craig and I talked about it. Dr. Raymond Brown, in his book, The Virginal Conception and Bodily Resurrection of Jesus, on page 101, I'm sorry, Dr. Craig, I would have shared this before, but I didn't realize it was going to come up. He says, and I quote him in his note 170, "I do not intend to discuss at any length the problem of the minor appearances of Jesus to Mary Magdalene and other women and to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, for the recipients of these appearances were not official witnesses, and so apparently did not shape the resurrection faith of the early community. For instance, the Markan Appendix in 1611 reports that no credence was given to Mary Magdalene. The omission of these minor appearances in Paul's Corinthian list does not necessarily imply that the tradition of such appearances was not historical, or was a late development, as some scholars would argue. The claim that the risen Jesus appeared first to Cephas means that among those who would testify publicly, Peter was the first to see Jesus. It would not exclude an earlier appearance to the Magdalene." So Raymond Brown, in that discussion, was not concerned with the minor appearances that were not formative in the development or the origin of that idea that Jesus had resurrected. Recall that our discussion, if for those of you who were there on Monday night, was on the question of what formed or caused the development and origin of this belief among the disciples. And it was not the resurrection appearance to Mary Magdalene or to anyone else. It was the appearance to the disciples themselves. And how many appearances were they? Dr. Craig would want to argue that there were multiple appearances, and I find support from Raymond Brown that in fact there was only one appearance. And there is a crucial problem regarding this appearance report. Where exactly did Jesus appear to his disciples? Was it in Galilee or was it in Jerusalem? If it were in Jerusalem, then Jesus, when he appeared to his disciples, specifically said, "Do not leave the city until the power comes to you from on high," which we know came at Pentecost, 50 days later. So there was no chance for the disciples to have gone to Galilee unless they disobeyed Jesus' instruction. And if Jesus had first appeared to them in Galilee, as would be reported in Matthew chapter 28, then in that appearance we see the disciples doubting that this was actually Jesus that appeared to them. But nevertheless, Jesus gives them the Great Commission. And it would seem then that this is the end of the appearances and there would be no room for a Jerusalem appearance. In fact, this is the interpretation and commentary that has been given by Raymond Brown. Now, Dr. Craig and others tried to give a sequence of these narratives to try and bind them all together in a coherent sequence. But Dr. Craig says that such a sequence, Dr. Brown says that such a sequence does too much violence to the gospel narratives. In the same reference that Dr. Craig gave earlier on, the Anchor Bible commentary on the Gospel of John. So then, where we are is here. The Quran does not deny that Jesus appeared to be crucified. In fact, this is what the Quran says. مَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. They killed him not, nor did they crucify him, but it was made so to appear to them. وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ. As for those who differ concerning him, they are in doubt concerning him, or concerning the matter of the crucifixion. مَا لَهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَّا اتِّبَاعَ الظَّنِّ. They have no knowledge concerning it except that they follow a conjecture. وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا. They did not definitely kill him. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. On the other hand, God raised him to himself. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. And surely God is mighty, he is wise. There have been many interpretations of this passage in the Quran from Surah 4, verse number 157. Some commentators have held that someone else was made to look like Jesus, and that someone else was crucified. Another interpretation that is gaining plausibility among Muslim scholars in modern times is the interpretation that, in fact, while it appeared that Jesus was being crucified, in fact, they did not succeed in killing him by crucifixion. And hence, on the definition that crucifixion means killing by hanging on a cross, in fact, while it appeared to the opponents of Jesus that they were doing exactly that, they had not succeeded in doing it. Now, I present this as a plausible hypothesis which would take into consideration the fact of the trial and the execution by hanging him on the cross, and the discovery of the empty tomb. And I would like to posit that if we take the earliest narratives, like for example the Markan narrative, especially in its pre-Markan form, then that narrative would be in harmony with this plausible interpretation of the Quran. And in that case, what we would have is the Jesus of the Quran that is believable from beginning to end, a Jesus in the Quran that does not contradict the historical findings. And on the other hand, we would have the Jesus of the Bible who cannot be believed in unless it can be proved that he actually resurrected from the dead. Now, to prove that he is resurrected from the dead, one has to have reliable reports. But we've already seen that first, the reports are so contradictory that if one were to read them and carefully study them, it becomes difficult to believe in these reports. Second, even though the reports tell you that Jesus appeared to his disciples, notice something that I said before. In Matthew 28:17, it says that when Jesus appeared to his disciples on that mountain in Galilee, they saw him and they worshipped him, but some doubted. One Bible translation says some were not sure it really was Jesus. And another translation says they doubted, which I take to mean that they all doubted. And if we study all of the reports carefully, we see that the doubt was a persistent one. That seems to survive in many of these reports, even in the Gospel according to John, where it appears that John is covering up that doubt. Nevertheless, we can read between the lines and we find that the doubt still remains. So if we have a variety of reports that tell us that Jesus rose from the dead, they cannot agree with each other, rendering them difficult to believe. And even if we were to take the narratives at face value, they're telling us that Jesus appeared, but he could not be positively identified. How could we then be certain that we have proof that Jesus resurrected from the dead? And so recall where we came so far. If I believe in the Quran, I would believe that Jesus is believable. Jesus is a prophet, a messenger of the mighty God. If I were to put the Quran away and examine the Bible and try to believe in Jesus, I would come to a point where I understand that Jesus is a false prophet, he is a blasphemer, a false Messiah. Only if someone can show me that Jesus actually resurrected from the dead can I believe in the biblical Jesus. So I put before you that the Quranic Jesus is believable, and the biblical Jesus has this problem that I hope that Dr. Craig will shed some light upon. Thank you.
If they do. Take it off somewhere. Could we just quieten down in the audience now and let Dr. Craig proceed?
Now, before I review those three facts about the historical Jesus that I attempted to establish in my opening speech, let me respond to Shabir Ali's general remark that the Jesus in the Quran is easy to believe in as opposed to the Jesus in the New Testament who appears to be a blasphemer. Well, I certainly